The real mindset is just like every no brings me closer to a yes. I think a big part of why people never make it is because they just can't tolerate the amount of pain that
Mm.
comes from having to bang your head on the wall over and over again. I had to take 40 to 50 no's, just no, 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 no. And I
Brutal.
just don't think that many people can take 40 to 50 no's and stay positive.
Welcome to Becoming Radical. We are excited to be here with you today. We are joined by Mike Mark. I love your name, by the way, man. Mike Mark, founder and CEO of Coaching Sales. Coaching Sales, from everything we understand, Mike, is really helping entrepreneurs and coaches and consultants with scaling high performance sales teams. Do we have that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we build performance-based remote sales teams. I've been doing it for over a decade now. So,
Amazing. That's amazing. So it sounds like you guys have a lot of expertise set in sales, team development, revenue growth. This is a big thing in today's day and age, propelling that sales engine, getting it moving. I think common distress point is we don't have enough leads, we don't have enough sales, and that obviously has a trickle effect to everything else. Can you tell me and tell us about what led you to start coaching sales and the problem more specifically you were trying to solve and market?
yeah, so initially what had happened was I was in this place where I was kind of lost, right? And I was working as a bellman. I hated my job. I
Yeah.
knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur and I was kind of going down this path. I'd read the 4-Hour Work Week, and there's this one
Mm.
sentence in the 4-Hour Work Week that just it like infected my mind like a virus. So
Yeah, yeah.
he says, fun things happen when you get paid in dollars, your business expenses are in rupees, and you're living on pesos. And I was just like, I gotta do that.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I randomly one day was scrolling Facebook while at this dead end job that I hated.
yeah.
And it was someone who was like, hey, my friend needs a salesperson for an agency. And,
Mm.
and you can work remotely and travel. If you're interested, DM me. And I had met this guy and he was an agency owner and he was kind
Yeah.
of living my dream life. And
Mm.
so I just messaged him and then he brought me into that company. We hit it off. I ended up going to the same college as the founder, and we both were huge rap fans and like just love rap music.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
hit it off, and I started taking sales calls for them, and they were only doing 100 grand a year, which I wouldn't even recommend most people bring someone in to take sales calls at
Yeah.
100 grand a year. But
Yeah, totally.
we didn't know anything, and so I had already sold timeshare and quit selling timeshare just because like soul wasn't feeling it, like I just didn't
Yeah.
like timeshare as a product and I felt like a scumbag when I was doing it, but it was a really good training ground to learn the art of sales.
Yeah.
And so I started selling and taking these sales calls and the founder's like, "What the heck, dude? You're like this is the first person who's ever closed as good as me, if not better." And I,
Mm.
I told him, I was like, "To be honest, man, I think this is like a little too easy. Like, can I raise the prices?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, if you think you can get more, like, give it a go." And so we were able to go from 100 grand a year to 1 million a year inside of 3 months.
It's
And
amazing.
I remember
Wow.
being like, what the heck just happened? Like, I was so mind blown. I
Yeah.
had no idea what happened, and I didn't know what caused it, and it was like that moment just created
Yeah.
this obsession to
Yeah.
understand if that was a one-off thing or if it was repeatable, and so then I
Mm.
just went deep down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think, being as how I started in the agency space as well, and kind of built my career in the agency world, it's a tough nut to crack, that space, being in the agency landscape and thinking about, your target is so key, right? You need to nail down the right target. Your pricing is so key, which you talked about, the art of sales. Can you tell us a little bit about, these challenges? So you guys changed pricing specifically with this agency group you were working with. And for those of you listening, not coming from the agency world, agencies do a lot of different things, as we know, right? So they do branding, they do marketing, they do websites and apps, all sorts of stuff, right? What were some of those early challenges, those biggest challenges in the earlier days of coaching sales? You talked about the benefit of changing pricing. That's a good thing, right? That helped you guys accelerate. But what are some of those challenges you faced in the very beginning of building out this repeatable infrastructure to grow this, to become radical as you are today in the market?
The biggest thing is you just don't know what you don't know, and
Yeah.
so I had to
God,
make a
yeah.
lot of the dumb mistakes, unfortunately, throughout the process. Like, I was so bad at training salespeople when I first started
Mm,
that my first sales hire ended up quitting sales as a career.
mm.
Like, he was just like, "Yeah, no, I don't think this is for me." And I knew,
Yeah.
like, I had essentially broken the guy, because I was so
Oh,
bad at training. And there's just a lot of those mistakes as you go through the process. And, at this point, we've built over 1,000 sales teams.
wow.
So we've really refined it. Like, I've recruited over 4,000 sales reps.
Wow.
We've helped clients do over $500 million in revenue. In
Incredible.
2022, the 60th fastest growing company on the Inc. 5000 in America was our client, where 7 out of 8 of the sales reps came from us, right? So,
Wow.
like, the every iteration, it just kept getting that 1% better, 1% better, 1% better,
Yeah.
and it's really just having the tenacity to stick with it, I think, is the real challenge that most folks really gotta face.
It's amazing. You guys remind me of somebody that flies under the radar, but is so principally important for every brand and business out there as they're growing and scaling, as they're becoming radical in market. If we think about, the mistakes that have been made in this growth effort, what do you think you've seen and done and experienced that if somebody was tuning in today and they were like, I want to build a sales team and the sales infrastructure, I want to propel my internal sales team forward or build my own brand or business. What are some of those like higher level mistakes that you've seen, that you've experienced? You're like, this has smacked you in the face and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I want to, I want to tell the world how to avoid this. What would that be?
Okay, so there's 3 big ones that I think for most people who are going at it the first time that are the
Yeah.
most common ones. The first is trying to do it too soon.
Mm,
So, a lot of folks wanna skip the steps. Take
yeah.
the steps. That's how you get strong, that's how you really figure it out. Like, as a founder, you want to develop message market match, product market fit, and trying to do that through someone else
Yeah.
is incredibly difficult, if not nearly impossible, right? Because
Yep.
most of the people that can do it are likely founding companies and running their own companies, or they're taking partnership in companies and coming in as a founding partner. So
Yeah.
a lot of folks want to skip that, and because they think like, I'm not good at sales, or oh, I don't have time to do this. And it's like, that's actually your most critical function
Yeah.
until you get to that 30, $50,000 consistently per month.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
really figuring that part out. The second big thing that I see is folks will try and task one person with the entire sales process. So
Mm,
they ask a sales hire to go out and generate leads and then book appointments and then
mhm,
close deals and follow up with the entire pipeline. And that is just not how it works.
mm-mm.
Not at all. So you got to break things down into small jobs.
Yeah.
And we teach a concept called the perfect sales team,
Mm,
which essentially top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel. At top of funnel, we wanna have automated leads,
mm,
right? And so really making sure you have a consistent, scalable way to bring leads in that's automated.
yeah.
And then in the middle of the funnel, we use setters, and then using the setters to contact those leads, to cultivate those relationships, and
Yep.
to qualify and set the appointments. You'll end up seeing you could get 2 times or more the number of appointments off the same set of leads once you have appointment setters in place.
Mm,
And the third piece is then having proven closers. And so to us, a proven closer is someone who's actually closed $1 million as a
mm,
consultative salesperson.
yep.
So a common thing that folks will do is they'll hire their buddy or a guy they
Mm,
know who's good with people, or a successful client who's not really a salesperson.
yep.
And that normally is a recipe to waste 3 to 4 months of your life
Mm,
and end up right back where you started. So you break it down into these small jobs. Another thing that happens is setters and closers are actually different personalities.
yeah.
So people think that like, oh, you should be a setter and then you become a closer. But actually, they're kind of different personalities. And so what will happen a lot of times is folks will hire, for example, a closer and ask them to set, and then they just won't do it, right? And then they get constantly frustrated with the closer for
Mm,
not setting. And then on the flip side, they'll hire setters and then try and get them to close the sales, but they can't close the front door, nonetheless a sale. So they end up in this situation where they're really frustrated. And if they just broke it down into small jobs,
Yep.
they would be able to find the right people a lot easier. They'd be able to ramp them up significantly faster, and
Mm,
it makes the person's day-to-day success much more reliable, and then they feel better about the role. It ends up just being a better equation for everyone. So that's the second piece is tasking one person to do the entire process. We see that a
mm,
lot. And then the third one that I see as a huge mistake is hiring one person and thinking you're good.
mm,
So in the military, they have a saying that two is one and one is none, right? If you're going
mhm.
to go skydiving, you better pack two parachutes.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm a big believer that, when we're ramping up sales reps, we actually treat ramping sales reps very similar to testing ads.
Mm,
So we'll actually take 3 sales reps and then put them on a 30-day trial and then just let the math do the talking,
yep.
as opposed to getting overly invested in the interview process and overly invested in one candidate and then
Yeah.
hanging on too long because sunk cost bias is just eating away at you.
The magic of math. Shut the front door. The magic of math. When you have those data points to play with, it goes a long way. And you're so right. I mean, I sales is an art, but it is also a huge skill set that can be learned and taught. And then I think when you have that inherent ability that can come to the surface, it's like taking a pro athlete and teaching them that skill. They have that capacity to get to the NFL or the NBA or whatever you want to call it, but it takes that time and that skill set and that resilience and that opportunity set. Yeah, in a world where sales is, as we know, often seen as transactional, a lot of people in different types of organizations, from VC-backed startups to mid-market to enterprise, they think, okay, they're just getting things in the door. They're just funneling things through. How do you and your team ensure sales is more about connection and authenticity and trust building? How do you bring that piece to the surface? How do you validate that part?
So I think the big thing is just making sure that you orient your sales reps to the long term
Yeah.
and taking that long-term mindset. And so one of the things we oftentimes really like to drill into the reps is making them understand, like, look, if you enroll a bunch of people who are not good fits, it's going to
Mm,
eat away at your own confidence and your own certainty, and then you're going to
yeah.
start to spiral out. Or it's gonna if you guys are focused on just cramming anybody and anybody into the program, what's gonna happen is you're gonna get bad reviews, and it's gonna make it harder for you to sell in the future.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, if you do a really good job of filtering out the bad fits and making sure that people have the right expectations and that you're enrolling them in a way that's honest and just straight up, then what you see is that people get thrilled as they go through the process, and then they start telling their friends and family or people that they
Yeah.
have in their network. And then for the sales reps, their lives start to get easier because now they're having, a bigger percentage of their deals are direct intros and
Mm,
referrals and things like that from building up the pipeline. And
yeah.
so getting them oriented really to the long term and seeing those second, third, fourth, fifth order consequences of the decisions that they make today, that's really how we make sure that they align with that.
There was a movie I saw when I was younger. I love sales. I've been in sales my whole life, just like you. I love it. It's ingrained in me. It's a part of who I am, but it's all about the relationship and the connection. There was a movie from years back before I was even born, right? 1970s or something. Glenn Ross, A always be B, C closing, always be closing, right? If you think about commission based sales roles versus salary based compensation for sales teams, what do you think works best? And is it customizable to the brand, the business, the organizational structure? Do you find that having that reward, if you will, that is greater is a bigger motivator than a straight salary component with a little bit of kickback? What do you like to do? What do you like to advocate for with these brands and businesses and teams you work with?
Yeah, so we're pretty much on the closing side, exclusively commission only.
Good. Yeah.
Um, and then with appointment setters, I've kind of tested some stuff, and I've been doing a lot more salary-based roles,
Mm.
interestingly.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
totally.
and the real thing though is there's no right or wrong way. It just depends on the business model.
Mm.
So for what we do, we can do commission only sales, because the sales cycles are relatively fast. So
Yep.
you're typically talking about a 30 to 60-day deal cycle in most cases. That can be done on a commission only basis. If you're talking about, enterprise oriented sales where it's a 6 months if you're lucky and really
Yeah.
upwards of 24-month deal cycle,
Mm.
then you're going to have to pay a salary with some bonuses when the deals close. And
Yeah.
so it comes down to the business model more than anything. Our real sweet spot is sort of like that 5,000 or really as low as 3,000 and upwards of about $100,000 is sort of a good sweet spot for us to be in with how our systems work. And so
Cool. Cool.
we're looking at those price points where the decisions are usually, one, two, maybe a couple follow-ups in terms of the call close rate. And then you're looking at a 30 to 60-day window in
Yeah.
most cases. Like that's sort of the sweet spot to do commission-based sales teams.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. When we think about businesses of different sizes and they really try to scale, they're trying to grow, they're trying to perform, they can hit these crazy revenue plateaus where everything just doesn't work out. And we've all been there. I know you guys have been there. I've been there. You're like, oh yeah, this is going to be $1 million month. This is a good month. This is a $10 million month. Who knows? Um, when that doesn't happen, how can somebody break through? How can they be like Gary Vee talks about as an example, get comfortable with losing. Just love it. Love losing. In sales, you really have to love not winning all the time and see the opportunity sets that can develop from those learned lessons of loss. How do you advise people to break through those bottlenecks? What does that look like for you guys?
So you said the word bottleneck. We're really big believers of the theory of constraints.
Mm,
So there's only one bottleneck in the system. Define the bottleneck, define
yep.
what the root cause is,
Yep.
define what potential solutions to that issue there would be.
Yep.
Create experiments, isolate your variables as best as you can, run your hypothesis, see what
Mm,
happens, measure, get your insights, and repeat, right? And so
yeah, totally.
that's how we approach scaling businesses. And I think a lot of people want to grow companies in straight lines or in
Mm,
exponential curves. And it may look like that if
yep.
you zoom out far enough. But if you're zoomed in, it actually looks a
Mm.
lot more like a staircase or like a stock market graph with these like crazy moments where it just surges up and then it kind of
Yep.
pulls out for a while.
Absolutely.
And, and those moments, the key to understanding those moments is that the business removed a constraint and they
Mm,
removed the bottleneck, and that removal of the bottleneck is what then creates the quantum leap. And
mm,
so we're sitting there and just really getting focused on removing the bottlenecks. And our approach to scaling companies, and a big part of why we're able to achieve hyper growth with companies so often, is that I know that generally when you're sub, about $20 million a year, you can solve anywhere between 1 to 3 bottlenecks in a year if
yep.
you're really focused. And each bottleneck will generally grow a company by 50 to 300%.
Wow.
And so, that's how you can get where a company 8X's in a year is because
Mm,
they hit 3 bottlenecks that they removed, and each one they hit a doubling. And
yeah. Yeah.
those sorts of moments are really big. And so, like, when we install closers for a lot of folks, like, I'll give you a really good example. Right now, I got a client that we're working with, and he helps entrepreneurs who have ADHD.
Mm,
And when he came to us, he was doing about $50,000 a month, and he had a good offer, is working on cold traffic, but he's taking
yeah.
sales calls all day,
Yeah.
and he's pretty drained,
Mm,
and he wanted to figure out how to get out of that process and bring sales reps in. So we started working together around in August, give or take, and, the first month into working together, he had actually broken through $100,000 for his first month.
wow.
And, just literally, so as of now that we're shooting this, it's February, but the first week of February, he did his first $100,000 week,
Wow.
right?
Kudos
And
to you guys. Wow, that's incredible.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty wild, but it just comes from,
Yeah.
like, he had a constraint, we removed that constraint, we
You got
ran the
rid of it.
play that we know
Yeah.
works, and then we saw the doubling almost immediately, and
Amazing.
then he needed more sales reps, and so we did it again, and then boom, now we saw
Mm.
another massive quantum leap, so.
It's amazing. And were they in that sweet spot of that 3 to 100K offering for this ADHD type
Yeah.
offering that they're bringing to market?
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
in the
cool.
5, 6 grand kind of price point
Amazing.
now.
That's incredible. Wow, 100K weeks. Good for him. Good for you guys. It's amazing. And that kind of goes back to delegation. How do you help founders transition from doing sales themselves to leading a sales team? Some entrepreneurs like me are like, yes, bring in the talent, bring them in. We want the best talent. We want to surround ourselves with brilliant people because you're great at what you do and you are you, but they are them and they can help you in other aspects of your business. But for those that are not sure about that. They've never been there before. This is all new to them. They may recognize it, but they may not quite yet. How do you introduce this concept of we're going to bring in the team to help you go from 50K net months, to 500K months on that level?
I think normally by the time people are coming to us, they're already exhausted and
Yeah.
overwhelmed, and they realize,
Yeah.
like, "Look, I'm doing too much and I just need
Mm,
help." And so
totally.
fortunately, they kind of come to that realization on their own. One of the things, though, that we do is I'm really big on communicating with them, like, "Here's what you're going to be feeling."
Mm,
And what for example, I have a lot of entrepreneurs, another guy that very similar story, he teaches people how to get into government contracting. He was doing
mm.
40,000 to $50,000 a month, and then within just a matter of 4 months, he hit his first $250,000 a month.
Wow.
And it was same play, we just installed the sales reps and got him out of that
Incredible.
process, and it took this huge quantum leap.
It's
Um,
amazing.
and for him, I told him, like, "One of the things that you're gonna feel is you're gonna be bored, and it's gonna be weird because 'cause you're gonna have all
Yeah.
this time, and then you're also gonna be making all this money, and then
Yeah.
you're gonna feel guilt, and
Yeah.
you're gonna feel like you're not doing enough, and,
Yeah.
like, you're gonna have these feelings like, I gotta prove my value, and I gotta work hard for money because we have these things that are built in our heads, and it's like, now you
Yeah.
have systems that are doing this work for you, and you actually don't need to
Mm.
work hard for money, you know, and
No.
and the boredom and the guilt, it will cause people to do stupid stuff.
Mm.
They'll inadvertently start thrashing and almost sabotage their own success
Mm.
because they weren't able to handle those weird emotions. And so I think a big
Yeah.
part of it is just by us shining light on those emotions. And another thing I tell clients all the time is like, look, like when we do what we do, we're going to break your business.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna be freaking out because then all of a sudden your ads aren't gonna be able to keep up with the sales team, or you're
Yeah.
gonna be freaking out
Yeah.
because all of a sudden you got more clients than you ever seen in your life, and you
You
thought
can't
your
fulfill them.
systems were
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
but now you've stress tested fulfillment at a different level, and you
Mm.
realize like, "Oh, this thing's not working as well as I thought." And
Yeah.
so, coming into those moments where that you're about to experience them, and us being able to say like, "Hey, this is gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's normal." That I think changes it for them to where, left to their own devices, they might accidentally have, pulled the plug too soon, or, thrown a fit, or
Mm.
kind of unraveled everything, but when they know it, they can just see it through.
It's incredible. It can be so self-sabotaging, when you see that $500,000 wire come in, you're like, "Oh yeah, this is good. I can sit back, but then you get bored. You're like, "Oh my gosh, what am I gonna do?" And then you're not doing enough. And then those of us that are wired in a way, I know you know what I'm talking about, where you're like, you have to always be hunting, you have to always be there's that dopamine hit that happens when you close. It gets boring after the close. When you're a closer, and you go in there and you close that business, and afterwards you're like, well, now what? I got to close again, because it keeps feeding that dopamine hit. But in the end, you're right, and I think it connects with other problems and nuances of the business, and that's a good thing because then it helps you think, okay, at scale, now that I've done this, I've created this bottleneck. Now I can solve for that. So then the boredom might actually go away because it gets redirected into a different part of your business. And that allows you to propel forward, to see that maturation, that opportunity to really grow something so different than you've ever seen before, whether you're an agency or a startup or a SaaS company, it's indifferent. And that kind of brings me to my next question. I mentioned SaaS, but it's kind of a crossover. If we think about AI, the big buzzword these days, AI, right? From OpenAI to Elon and everything happening there, uh, et cetera. How do you think AI and automation plays with sales today? And how should businesses really use these tools without losing the human component that we have right now? Where do you think that balance exists?
It's definitely a hybrid, and really where I think that we're seeing folks are running into more challenges with AI than anything
Yeah.
is in the half-life of offers, and the half-life of messaging has gotten much
Mm,
shorter
yeah.
because now other folks can replicate and duplicate what you have in market
Mhm.
extremely fast. They might not be able to replicate and duplicate the bones of your product delivery,
Yeah.
but a lot of times the market doesn't even know about the bones of your product delivery, and they're not even qualified to evaluate it. So they're just looking on the outside at like, what's the packaging look like? And other people are able to copy and rip off messaging so fast.
Yeah.
So it's definitely making advertising more difficult than it's ever been. It's also, making it where prospects are more confused in the buying process
Mm,
because, they're seeing an ad from you, but then all of a sudden Facebook now is tuned in a way that
yeah.
you got one ad, you got 20 of them, and then they all start to blur together and you can't remember which guy's which. And
Uh,
so we're starting to just see that the speed at which your offer is gonna be ripped off, the speed
yeah.
at which your message is gonna be ripped off, as well as the number of other alternatives your prospects are gonna be seeing prior to them really entering into the sales process with you, that's changing the dynamics in the sales process in a big way, and that's where we're seeing a lot of AI and the challenges of dealing with it.
Yeah, totally, man. I agree. How do you become radical against and aligned with AI? How do you stand out when everything is hyper automated, hyper scalable, duplicated, extendable? You've got this messaging and that messaging. Yeah, how do you differentiate, radically differentiate in the sea of the same? What is the goal set with that with AI?
One of the things that I personally believe with AI is that AI and large language models are trained on a massive amount of data.
Yep.
And so, because it's trained on so much data, you kind of end up with the average.
Mm,
You don't get the outliers as much, and outliers are squashed
yeah.
in terms of like their ability to get to catching traction. So, when you
Mhm.
have approaches that are an outlier, the market can sense it, and they
Yeah.
can read it in the messaging, and they can read it in a lot of how you're approaching what you're doing,
Yep.
and you'll hear from them like, "This makes sense, I like how this is different from what else I'm seeing." And so it's in a way becoming easier because people are gravitating towards just being sort of average and mediocre and just
Yeah.
not examining it deeper and not training it deeper, right? So, like, with AI for us, we have it really tuned, like,
Nice.
it knows my voice, it knows my influences, it knows what
Wow.
music I like, it knows what comedians I like, it knows so it's able to call references and
Mm,
ideas and pull information from things that's actually truly me,
yeah.
and then therefore it doesn't sound like, "Unlock your revenue skill and boost your sales," you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
any ChatGPT prompt, you're ending up with too many
Yeah.
emojis, boost, skyrocket, unlock,
Yep.
and it's like, "Oh, it sounds terrible." And so really getting it tuned to those details where it
Yeah.
knows like, "No, Mike likes Rick Ross." So,
Yeah.
like, we
Yeah.
can use a Rick Ross quote in the sales letter, and
Mm.
it smashes, and it's actually landing with a
Amazing.
target audience instead of sounding like some super generic vanilla copy.
It's really cool, man. And I think that's the future of AI and where it's going. I mean, it's augmenting, it's aligning, it's getting you to a place where as a business, as a brand, as an entrepreneur, as a serial entrepreneur, you're able to lean into it and it can actually help you. We often are afraid of AI. It's human nature. It's the next thing. It's like another industrial revolution. It's coming. You see the Super Bowl ads with Meta and Ray-Ban and they've got glasses, smart glasses. That's coming too. Technology it's rapidly changing and evolving as we know. And as it relates to sales, as it relates to growth, I think it can be our friend. And just as you said, if we lean into it the right way, so many amazing things are going to come from that. But we have to have the right team, like you guys at Coaching Sales, that can support that process and really lean into it the right way. I think that's really important. When you think about a big lesson you've learned about scaling a coaching, a consulting business, a sales organization, what's one counterintuitive lesson that you've learned about that process?
There's a way that your product, your marketing and your sales all
Yeah.
dance.
Mm,
And there's like your marketing, you test messages to find what the market wants, and then you have to build the features into your product. And also, when you're building features in your product, those features then can become selling points or messaging points. And so, by making your product better, you're able to change the claims you can make in the market.
mm,
And so, playing with that dance and letting your marketing and sales process inform your product development, but then also let your product development inform your marketing and sales.
yeah.
And what I think that is a little bit counterintuitive is a lot of folks get used to a very hierarchical, siloed model of companies. So
Mm,
here's marketing over here, here's sales over here, and here's product over here.
yep.
And they're not relaying these insights fast enough, or they're not even communicating at all. It's very common for me to see, you know, the marketing team doesn't meet with the sales
Mm,
team, or the sales team doesn't meet with the client success team because they think it's a
yep.
waste of time.
Yep.
And to be able to pull them all together and get sales to say, "Hey, this other competitor has this feature and we keep losing deals to this feature," so that the product team can build that
Mm,
feature. And then the product team building new features, communicating to the sales and marketing teams, "Hey, you can now make these claims
yeah,
because this feature exists." And
exactly.
so that dance and making sure that everybody's communicating, that's one of the more counterintuitive things that I think people run into a lot.
You're absolutely right, man. It's such a delicate dance when we think about, the interplay between teams, and I see this a lot too myself, where marketing doesn't interface with strategy doesn't interface with sales not with design not with development, or whatever it is, right? They're in these vacuums, these silos, like the show Silo on Apple TV, same thing. They're in their silos, they don't come out, and when they hear something, there isn't that dance. And I think if we all did this more, if we all danced well, like a tango, we did that really well. If we jived together, if we were fluidly moving, so many great things would happen. But I think it starts at the top too. You got to have a lot of people who are receptive to there needs to be that synergy. We need to work together. And it doesn't have to be the kind of thing where we're always huddling, we're always micromanaging, but it's just this unification idea. And how much do you think mindset plays a role in this? Do you think there are some shifts and tricks, personal habits that could be critical to success in sales and sales teams specifically?
Uh, I think there's a huge part of it is just the messaging and also demonstrating it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times founders wanna just kind of go laissez-faire once the team's
Yeah.
there, and then that is a recipe for a disaster.
Yeah.
Um, and as a leader, like, being cross-functional and being, very T-shaped in your expertise and, taking where you're studying each of the different departments and you're studying all this stuff and demonstrating that's a big factor and encouraging people to do that too. So, I'm a big believer that each of the departments, they need to study the other departments
Yeah.
because, it's like if you're playing football, for example, right, and you're the offensive line guy, but you don't
Yeah.
know what the running back's gotta do or what the wide receiver's gotta do, then you don't
Mhm.
necessarily understand why the play is running the way it's running.
Nope.
And so it's important for each person not only to know what they need to do, but understand how the whole system's working together. And that just starts from really like embedding that as a part of the culture where you are encouraging people to shadow in other departments, you're encouraging communication between departments, you're
Yep.
encouraging them to read specific books so people are kind of seeing things in a certain way that it's a shared jargon, there's a shared language, shared frameworks and how we're approaching solving these problems. That's really what I think is the biggest thing because a lot of folks just get to where they're good at their job and they think that's enough and
Yeah.
it's never enough.
It's never enough. I agree 100%. You know, there are people that are in this game, and luck is such a big thing, and there's an art to luck too. There's a skill to luck, as we both know, right? There's a lot of numbers, a lot of data. But let's say you're new to this game, you're in sales, you're an entrepreneur, you're a founder, you're a team, whatever. Either you've dealt with rejection or you've never dealt with rejection. So you're the guy, you're like the quarterback of a football team in high school. Every girl loves you, right? You've never dealt with rejection, or you see it every day. How do you develop resilience in either scenario in sales, specifically if you're a founder-led team, a marketing team working with sales, whatever the composition looks like, in any scenario, how do you deal with rejection and setbacks? What would you advise someone to think about?
I think being crazy helps a lot for sure. That's one thing I got
Yeah,
going for me.
yeah, good.
But I think the real mindset is just like every no brings me closer to a yes. And
Yeah.
but
Yes.
one of the things that like when you're proving out offers, I, I think a big part of why people never make it in the game
Mm,
and they end up sort of having to retreat or go back to whatever
yep.
their 9 to 5 was is because they just can't tolerate the amount of pain that
Mm,
comes from having to bang your head on the wall over and over and over
mm,
and over again. Like, offers that I've gotten to crack, 'cause I've been lucky enough to have, over, like, 6 offers that I've created and I
yeah,
own and control that are multi-million dollar offers. And every time is really hard at the beginning. And like the fastest I've ever done it, I had to take like 40 to 50 no's, just no, 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 no. And I
brutal.
just don't think that many people can take 40 to 50 no's and stay positive. And
Totally.
those are my best case scenarios. The
Absolutely.
worst case scenario, like, I can take no's on an offer for 2 years straight sometimes
Mm,
trying to get it to crack. Because
yep.
what a lot of folks don't realize too is when you are trying to get these offers to crack is it can be the difference between 2 words.
Mm,
Like, 2 words and how you phrase one part of your offer can totally change the reception that
absolutely.
prospects have for it, and that's hard. It's
It
hard
is.
to have the optimism and to continue to test and continue playing with it when you're not getting immediate results. And I think that most people, our brains, I mean, all of us, our brains want instant gratification, right?
Yep.
And for most people, they are looking at like, hey, this should be easy. It should be fast. It should be this like, I push the button, I get the result. And
Mhm.
really just teaching yourself to sit with problems for long periods of time. I've been really blessed to watch my dad go
Mm.
through this part where, my dad's solved problems for 16 years with no
Mm.
results. And I've
Wow.
watched him still get up every single day, excited to go try and solve the problem and
Amazing.
continue to stay optimistic about the process of doing that. And it's something that I think about a lot whenever I'm in the moment of like, ah, shit, I just want to give up. This is stupid. What
Mhm.
can I use? Then it's like, you just keep sitting with the problem, sit with the problem, and if you stay in it long enough, the only way you're gonna lose is if you quit. Every no
Yep.
gets you closer to the
It.
yes. You're just getting data, and those are the sorts of beliefs and things
Yeah.
that I'll tell myself when I'm in that moment to keep pushing.
Confidence is so king, and equally, I think having that mindset of, and I say this a lot to myself too, you can't fail if you never give up. You keep going. Now, what that means, and I think this is the unpacking here, that doesn't mean you keep doing the same thing expecting a different result. That's insanity, right? That's a definition of insanity. But what that does mean is you keep going. You don't stop, you pivot purposefully. You think of new tips, new tricks, new methods, new strategies, new teams. And you find different ways to get to the outcome. And the outcome is going to change too. It's not always going to look the same. It might look like you're chasing 50 million ARR in 5 years today, but tomorrow it might look like 30 or 100, and those are numbers, but it could look like so many different things. So, I think in the end, what's interesting here and what we're really talking about isn't the quick win, it's the long term success. So if we're coaching sales reps or entrepreneurs or founders or teams, how do you approach people to get them to think about that, the bigger picture? Okay, we're going to see some quick wins more than likely, but to get here, we have to be on this level. What's your approach like for that?
I'm very candid. So I have a
Yeah,
client of mine that I've worked with now for over 3.5 years. And when he first came
yeah.
to me, he was at sort of freelancer stage, right? He would do like 10 to 15
Mhm.
grand a month, super
Yep.
inconsistent. He's doing everything, he's burnt out. And he was like, Mike, I need to be doing better. Like I want to be making $1 million. And I told
Mm,
him like, listen, if you do everything I tell you to do, you will make $1,000,000. It's gonna take longer than you expect, it's gonna be
Yep.
harder than you want it to be, and it's not gonna happen in 3 months or 6 months, you gotta do this for 3 years, and if you give me 3 years, and you can still make some dumb mistakes along the way, but give me 3 years and just do what I'm telling you to do, and you'll be a millionaire, and the cool thing
Mhm.
is, he actually is a millionaire today. So,
Amazing.
yeah,
Good to
just
know, man.
just really
Yeah.
being forward with stuff and
Yeah.
letting people know, like, "Hey, this is gonna suck, it's gonna be
Mm.
hard, there's gonna be stuff you don't wanna do,
Yep.
but at the end of the day, what are you really doing it for?"
Yeah.
And if you want uncommon results, then you're gonna have to do things that are uncommon in order to
Yep.
get those results.
I love that. And I think it's principally important for people to know that even if you're down or even if you're up, things change. You have to have that alignment with vision and where you're going. What are you chasing? Matthew McConaughey is chasing greatness, 10-year version of himself. What are you chasing? What will you chase to get you to there? That's all about becoming radical. I mean, that's what we're talking about. And I think if we think about the future of high ticket coaching and sales, where do you think it's going in the next 5 to 10 years? We talked AI, but what about the industry at large? Predictively, what would you like to see? Where do you think it's headed?
To be honest, I think the industry is just gonna continue growing. I don't see any radical innovations per se happening to the
Yep.
industry. AI is obviously gonna be a factor and it's gonna be a part of it, but there's also gonna be a counter reaction to AI,
Mm. Yep.
right? It's like, "Oh, well, we have streaming, so now everybody wants to have vinyl records." And
Yep.
so we're gonna see the same thing happen in coaching where it's like, "I don't want the AI, but I want a person," and people wanna
Mhm.
work with specific people for
Hmm.
specific reasons, much as
Interesting.
they've always have, like,
Yeah.
we back when Dan Kennedy was saying stuff, you're buying Dan Kennedy products because you think he's funny or you like him and he's so
Yeah.
smart, or, I'm hand copying letters from Gary Halbert just because I think Gary Halbert's funny and, like, his quirks and his personalities and how he's
Yeah.
writing, and so people will always still connect with people at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and that's what largely drives coaching and consulting.
Yeah.
It's a people to people business. There's a heavy aspect of it that's service oriented, a
Yep.
heavy aspect of it that's sales oriented. A heavy aspect of it is that we're looking at the unique genius that someone has, especially someone whom we may relate to, and
Yeah.
want to accelerate our ability to acquire that genius by being close to them. And so we're paying for proximity, we're paying for
Mm.
just real guidance and mentorship and perspective from someone who has a qualified perspective. So I feel like it's going to stay very much the same in its formats. The trends always come and go, right?
Yeah.
And if you're looking at, you know, right now, school groups were a big trend. I see
Mm.
them starting to slowly phase out. We're coming kind of all the way back around to folks
Mhm.
wanting to do webinars or wanting to do book a call funnels, which that was sort
Mhm.
of out of vogue for a little bit. And
Mm.
so you're gonna see a lot of that stuff continuing to cycle. And the main thing for most folks that I always encourage them to do is like, don't cheat off your neighbor's paper because
Mm.
very often they have a different version of the test than you.
Mm.
Keep your eyes on your own paper, not because it's the right thing to do, just because
Yeah.
it's your paper and
That's it.
you're the person who's the most qualified person to answer these questions,
Yeah.
and you should live with the results of your answers too.
Mm.
That's going to give you the feedback loop to help you get sharper and sharper at this. So, a lot of people, they want to do the hot thing, they want to do the
Mm.
fad, but the fads come and go. What really matters is if you build your business on long-term principles. One of the things that Jeff Bezos once
Oh,
said,
yeah.
and I always love this, was he's like, you know what? People always come to me and they ask me like, "Hey Jeff, what's going to change in 5 years?" And he's like, what I find really interesting about that question is I
Mhm.
feel like people are asking the wrong question.
Yep.
They should be asking what's not going to be changing in
Mm.
10 years and build their business around that.
That's
And
good.
his whole premise was like, "Do you think people will wanna have higher prices 10 years from now, or they'll
Mm.
continue wanting to save money? Do you think people will want less selection or more selection? Do you think people will
Mhm.
wanna wait longer for the goods or want them immediately?"
Mm.
He's like, "The things that we built around for the long-term strategy of the business were the things that were not gonna change in 10 years."
That's
And
good.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
really tuning into that and thinking like, what's not gonna change in 10 years? And for a period of time, like, I had an existential crisis. So, like, oh my
Mm.
goodness, what happens if there's no more setters or closers and people don't need
Yep,
salespeople? But then I'm
yep.
just like, that's just not gonna happen. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah.
people want to interface with people,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's still gonna be a huge component of how products are bought and sold. So, I feel very confident continuing to build in the direction that we're building with this.
I love that. I think it's spot on. Great advice, by the way. Your advice and what you mentioned, I think you're spot on. And it's doom and gloom sometimes at the beginning. It's like asteroids going to hit in 2032. It was 1% chance. Now it's 2%. Tomorrow it'll be 3%. You keep seeing the headlines. And that's what hits you because it's clickbait and it affects you at a human level, at an intrinsic level. But what we start to then realize, we come out of it, we come out of the darkness, and we're like, you know what? It's going to be there. We're human. We want to engage. We want to interact. We want a relationship. We want to connect. So you're absolutely right. And I guess this brings me to one of my final things for you is, if you're talking to an entrepreneur today, a founder, a team, and they're on their way to becoming radical, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give them from your expertise set? What would you say? This is what I would do to perform, to grow, to scale from a sales perspective.
Really build it foundationally around the perfect sales team, right? So
Yep.
automate your leads at the top of the funnel, leverage
Yep.
those setters in the middle of the funnel, bring in proven closers at the bottom of the funnel, break it down into small jobs. And when you do that, you'll watch this thing scale so dramatically
Yep.
fast, it will blow your mind. And a lot of people they wanna try and do just a component of it, or, "Oh, I'm
Mm.
gonna change this part of it." And it's
Yep.
like, when you really have and you'll see a lot of the businesses that are hyper successful in this, that's what they got. They got, automated leads where they're
Yep.
running some sort of paid media at the top of the funnel. They have is setting systems where both automated and human setters are reaching out to leads, qualifying, nurturing relationships, and
Yeah.
moving them along in the process. And then they have human to human phone sales, Zoom sales, whatever you're doing at the bottom of the funnel. Like, when you do that, the thing just it accelerates everything dramatically.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so true, man. Are there any upcoming projects or innovations, things you guys are working on in coaching sales that you're excited about, where you're taking it to the next level? Anything you can announce or share, or just stuff you're working on that you're pumped about?
Yeah, over the past 2.5 years, I've gone through every single department of
Yeah.
the business, and I have taken every single system all the way down to the nuts and bolts,
Wow.
and I asked myself, "How can we do this faster,
Mm.
cheaper, better?" And
Yep.
then question all my assumptions and then
Mm.
rebuilt the entire thing. So, like,
Nice.
coaching sales right now today, on the surface, it looks all the same because we're
Yep.
not changing our positioning, we're not changing our messaging, and
Yeah.
things. There's a lot of components that have really stayed the same, like fundamental principles of how we do things, like trialing 3 reps in order to land one. That's something that we figured out at the first 10 sales teams we built, and then I was like, oh, I'm never hiring one sales rep ever again. So
Yeah.
there's components of what we do that's stayed the same, and but
Mhm.
like the entire system, we overhauled everything, and right now
Wow.
we're firing this thing on all cylinders, and just like in general, the overall ecosystem. And it's details. It's the details, details,
Mm.
details, details. Some of the details are so nerdy and so
Yeah.
minuscule seeming that it goes over folks' heads.
Yep.
Just for example, with our appointment setting script, I rewrote the script. One of the things I stopped doing was I stopped gapping, which gapping is when you
Mm.
ask someone like, "Where are you now? Where do you wanna be? What do you feel like is the biggest thing
Mhm.
holding you back?"
Yep.
Um, we completely stopped doing that, and
Mm.
I found it was actually creating bad customer experiences. It was forcing me to hire setters primarily from US speaking markets, which
Mm.
was terrible. They're overpaid, they're
Mm.
ungrateful, turnover rate was super high, the management is just, nauseating how much time you had to spend managing US-based setters. Like, if they got
Mhm.
cheaped out by a prospect, they need a day in therapy almost, right? Like, versus a lot of
Yeah.
my folks who are in developing world countries, like,
Yeah.
they get chewed out by a prospect and they didn't even remember that it happened. Like, it just
It's no
water on a
recall of
duck's
that,
back.
yeah.
Yeah.
On to the next thing, yeah, totally.
Yeah, but it
Yeah,
came from the script, and so we
yeah.
changed the script from gapping and having
Mm,
these open-ended questions to
interesting.
close-ended questions,
Wow.
and it made the whole process faster for the prospect.
Cool.
It was less emotional resistance and just resistance in general.
Hmm.
It narrowed the number of possible routes that the conversation can go, so the conversation became significantly more predictable. It then allowed us to offshore our appointment setting talent, even the phone talent, and as a result, I'm paying these people a fraction of the amount of money to what I was paying my US team. I'm getting significantly better performance, and I have a fraction of the management overhead that I had on it as well. So
Yeah, totally.
just it's details like that though, but the whole entire product and all of
Yeah,
our systems have been re-engineered over 2.5 years, and that's
amazing.
why I've been really quiet over the last 2.5 years, was because I was heads down working on all this stuff,
Mm,
and then now that it's really, like, ready for prime time,
yeah.
I'm ready to pop out a lot more.
And what's cool is you're paying it forward to these teams, these businesses, these brands, these entrepreneurs, these founders, because you've developed systems that will work even better and more efficiently for them. So, I think kudos to you to coming up with that level of detail that can propel their growth in market. So, where can everybody find you? I mean, I'm stoked for what you're doing, and I'm sure our listeners will be too. Where can they find you guys? Where are you online, social, anything you could share today for people to find you guys?
Yeah, go to coachingsales.com. That's the best place to find us. We have some free resources there if you guys want to check out some of that. There's trainings, tons of case studies so you can see what it looks like. We've worked in all kinds of different markets, from, coaches, agencies, software as a service, medical providers, legal consultants, you name it. We've pretty
Yeah.
much done it across the board in these sectors. And so there's a lot of the different examples there. But coachingsales.com is definitely the best place. And if anyone wants to connect with me on a personal level, just Mike Mark. You can find me on Facebook, is where I'm most active. But I'm on all platforms. If you just Google Mike Mark, I'll pop right up, and hey, add me as a friend on Facebook or send me a LinkedIn connection and mention the show too. I would love, mention Becoming Radical so I know where y'all came from. And if there's anything that stood out to you in the episode, let me know. That stuff really helps me a lot and helps me spread the message and know what's resonating and connecting with folks.
Well, Mike, Mark, you're making magic, man. You've got it happening here. You're changing the game. You guys have systems that scale. We're so glad you could be here today. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for educating us all on what the right moves are, the bottlenecks in market, how to overcome them, and ultimately how we can work together to build a more uniformed organization that can scale well sustainably, thinking big picture, not just quick win, and how that can really tie back together to achieving vision for what we want. So it's been great having you here, man. Thank you so much for your time. And we're excited to keep connecting and watching you thrive, and your clients and everyone you work with really kill it in market. So appreciate everything.
This has been a blast, Michael. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we'll talk soon, man. Take it easy.